Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, July 19th, 2023, and today we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last week or so. And as we do each week, we take our questions that we answer here on the Roundup from our newsletter that comes out on Monday mornings, and we'll do a plug as we do each week for that. There are a couple of different ways you can subscribe. You can do that through our website at smieconsulting.org/subscribe. And I've dropped the link to the website for that where you can drop in your details to subscribe to that email version. But if you prefer to get it via LinkedIn, that's where I get a lot of my international ed news outside of my many Google alerts. We also have a LinkedIn version of that same content that has, between the two versions, has over 1,250 subscribers. So thanks so much for making this newsletter a part of your international edification each week. And for those of you that aren't yet subscribed, please do so that you kind of have a head start on what's going to be coming each Wednesday. And this Wednesday, we'll be coming to you, as we do each week, live from our home office. But next week, we'll be on vacation, so there'll just be a quick thoughts video live on the 26th of Wednesday, the 26th of July. I'll share some thoughts on after getting some downtime and chance to process everything that's been happening over the past few months in our field and getting ready for the next academic cycle that's about to begin. But for those of you who haven't yet subscribed, please do consider subscribing to the newsletter so you can get this content early. And thank you again, those who will also always watch live, or when you can watch live and can contribute to the conversation. We try to answer any questions you have live and give you a shout out, obviously, for joining in when we have you and know that you're online. So thanks again for being a part of that conversation. Especially to those of you who watch on repeat. Obviously, we don't get the live interaction, but I hear from you whenever we connect in person. Really appreciate the feedback on the Roundup and the newsletter. So thanks so much for being a part of the SMIE consulting family. So let's get to our first question of the week, and that is, how can we recruit in Africa? Now, this is a topic that for many of my colleagues, Africa has long been an area that they've either wanted to become more active in or have committed to going either on tours or individual fairs. Few have identified decent educational agents in the continent. Some work exclusively with EdUSA. Some do a mix of both. So I appreciate all of those of you who have had that initiative to get plugged in Africa and make it a part of your your recruitment portfolio in terms of where you go. But there is so much about Africa that most of us don't know, and particularly those that are newer to international recruitment. And that is really the crux of why we're having this question today. And how can we recruit in Africa? A lot of us want to, but we hear things about high visa denial rates in sub-Saharan Africa. We hear issues of corrupt agents and fraudulent documents being commonplace around the country, around the continent. So what do you do, and how do you go about establishing a recruitment plan? I think the first thing that you need to do is refer to the experts in the region. And our friends at ISEF Monitor have did an article this past week, and the link to which is in the article. It's about a new white paper by Loom Student Advisory Services. Has a lot of great content in it. The white paper itself, I've also dropped the link to that. Has some fantastic historical perspective that's important when you're recruiting in Africa, given its colonial past, but also things to think about as you go forward, how not monolithic Africa is. Obviously, you got the Arab North Africa, and you've got West, East, and Central Africa. Southern Africa could be added into that as well, potentially. So there's a whole range of folks and types of students and types of countries that you're going to be potentially recruiting students from. And the question is, how do you recruit that well. And it has to, it may be from to the outside looking in, as a university at UNLV, we're not active yet in Africa. Well, that is a goal of ours in the next 3 to 5 years. But as based on working with colleagues who've been active in the region for years, knowing the EdUSA community there very well, and the history of strong REACs that they have. We have 2 REACs in Africa now, Diane Weiss-Young, based in Nigeria, I think, and then, or maybe Ghana. Sorry, Diane. I know she may be moving around too as well, but still REAC for West and Central Africa. And then newly appointed Elisa Moroni, formerly of Shoreline Community College, and now REAC for Southern and East Africa. So those 2, plus we have Melissa Deschamps and Karen Bauer, who are the REACs for the Middle East region. I can't remember which of them right now oversees the North African region. I think it's Melissa. But they each have their own perspectives on this as well, on the differences, the different regions of Africa that are made up, that make up this fascinating continent. Colleagues of mine have called it the new China in terms of population, where they, by 2035, I think it is, the numbers are that they will have, by 2030, excuse me, 1 out of every 4 people on the planet will aged 15 to 24, so roughly college-age demographic, will live in Africa. So it's going to be that kind of a market, that kind of a very diverse market that you want to have on your radar within the next 5 to 7 years, developing a base of resources and contacts in the region that can help you navigate a very complex continent. In addition to this, why I focus on this white paper, and not only knowing how difficult and different Africa is as a continent to recruit in, there are some stereotypes you need to think about, and how you promote yourself as an institution. That there are still people out there, and not necessarily international recruiters, God forbid, that still call Africa a country. It's clearly not. It's a continent, massive continent, that can fit the entirety of the United States, as well as a number of other European countries, into Africa, into its geographic area. They think that these stereotypes in terms of poverty, corruption, inequality between classes, that type of thing, the disparity of the gaps in wealth from the 5-star hotels that you might stay in when you go to recruit to the extreme ghettos and poverty-stricken areas of major urban areas. Those are stark contrasts that you have to reconcile. But educational quality is different across the region as well, and it's not it's not a market that that oftentimes the students and the parents actually see themselves in marketing materials that we send out, and that's one of the comments that the white paper makes, especially, is that Africa is not Asia or Latin America. That when they're thinking about studying abroad, they would like to know if there are people like them studying at your institutions, as do all students from wherever they are in the world. And many of our brochures will have many Asian students, South Asian, East Asian, Latin American students, maybe some European students, or Caucasian students, but rarely. You might have some multicultural students that represent African American students or other communities, but Africans don't typically see themselves in our brochures. And that's something we need to think about, is if we're going to market to students in that region, we should be including images of students like them, because ultimately that's what we want to portray for any student that comes to our universities and colleges, is they want to be able to see themselves as a student on your campus. And if they can't answer that question in an affirmative way and in a very positive way, then they're probably not going to choose you. Almost I guarantee they won't choose you unless they get a full scholarship and you're the best option for them that way. So let's think about our marketing to them, and in terms of Current students that you have involved in live chats, that might be student ambassadors, having one from the region certainly will help to paint that picture for you. Testimonial videos from successful graduates or current students. Those are the kinds of things that can play and should play to students in the region that you're trying to target. Most of us don't specifically target Africa, but we need to if we're going to be effective in drawing outside of the top name schools that get more applications than they know what to do with from the region. The challenge for us as institutions, if we're going to be taken seriously in market in Africa, is having students like them represented in our materials, in our socials. And that's what they're looking at. They're looking at our websites. They're looking at our social media sites to gain information about whether it's a place where they might see themselves fitting in. And we all know about the phenomenon of stealth applicants or stealth prospects, that they go around and get all the information they need before they even reach out to apply. And that's something we need to think about, is what we know what students are coming through the top of the funnel on the application side. We don't know how many students don't move forward through the process beyond prospect to apply because they don't see themselves represented in our content online. So that's what we really need to think about in terms of reaching markets that we're not active yet in, and that's certainly one thing they point out. A fourth item that they mention is that trust is earned, and the study abroad tradition is well entrenched in some countries in the world, but in Africa it's not so much. The recruiting environment, as they say, in some African countries has, quote unquote, been compared to the Wild West. Lots of agencies, schools, primarily interested in making money, and too little guidance available to families to help them guard against unscrupulous actors, unquote. That puts the nail on it, on the pin in the cushion, whatever you want to call it, nails the problem that most of us have in dealing with Africa, is knowing where to start. And that's really where the reputable actors through Education USA, through ISEF's training that they provide to agents, and then perhaps they have an agent workshop, for lack of a better term, speed dating event they do in Africa for institutions to connect with African agents. So there's some vetting that goes through allowing those to be part of that process. Looking at AIRC certification as well is something for U.S. colleges that we should think about. We'll talk more about agents in our next question, but as it relates to Africa, identifying quality actors in the field in country are the ones that you really need to pay significant attention to. That's it's in addition to the numbers that we're talking about, that we're 1 in 4 college-age students on the planet by 2030 will live on the continent of Africa. That should perk up your senses, perk up your spidey senses, whatever you want to call it, in terms of this is something we need to focus on. That it should matter to, as a continent, it should matter to everyone. That's one of the 5th points that they make. That what's important to do is conduct research before marketing your programs to parents and students in Africa, in particular countries within Africa. Accepting students that without knowing that they need a prep year, so that might be a mistake. Enrolling students without having adequate support in place in terms of language, academic, social, psychological support, that type of thing. So there's a lot that, and the white paper is really worth a read to kind of get your head around a lot of the issues and some of the economic factors in different countries, in Tunisia, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, some of the bigger players internationally, what that means for you. So there's a lot that you can do, but minimally you need to start with start with your attention on a few key markets. And obviously, if you're looking at Africa from a U.S. perspective, you know that Nigeria, you know that Kenya, you know that Ghana, you know that South Africa are the top 4 sending countries from Africa where where universities might want to get plugged in to start, and just start small and build out from there. There may be hidden markets that you might have an alumni connection in that you can leverage to build credibility in a particular market. There's a lot of things that you can and should be doing as part of your overall recruitment that you can also apply effectively to Africa. So there's a lot that you can and should do if you're going to take Africa seriously in your recruitment strategies. But for now, do want to at least get you the white paper link, get you the ISEF article, and share some of those, share some of the real important tips and trends that you need to be focusing on as you're moving through consideration of how to recruit in Africa. So that's a very complex one. We could do a whole roundup, probably 2 or 3 roundups just on Africa in terms of going into the details of what would differentiate strategies in particular markets. But certainly there's so much to digest, but wanted to at least get that conversation started. Second question of the week: how should we treat educational agents? Now, this is a long-standing question or debate in the higher ed circles, particularly in the United States. We know that educational agents have been a thing for going on nearly 40 years. They started in Australia in the mid-'80s. They have been an important tool for Australian universities, British universities, Canadian universities, and increasingly U.S. Universities to recruit students to come to their universities. So in the U.S., we're catching up with a lot of our Western colleagues in terms of how we utilize agents, and how we treat them is also an issue. I think this is something that my colleagues at INTED, at ARC talk about regularly, about some of the quality control issues we need to have in place as we're vetting agents, bringing them into the fold. But more importantly, how do we treat them once they're part of our recruitment team, basically? And in effect, that's what they are. Though they're outside the U.S., many of them, they are recruiting students in markets that you want to have come to the United States, to your institution that you want. You need help in getting those students interested in our institutions, and then helping shepherd those students through the application process and through enrollment. So they have and should be seen, in my opinion, and in most enlightened international educators' opinions, they need to become and treated as part of your team. And how do you do that? You can do that in a number of ways. And first, it's all about looking at them as our colleagues at INTED have shared in a recent article about humanizing our educational agents, and what does that look like, and the differentiating in terms of the kinds of agents you should work with versus the kinds of agents that are out there, aggregators, one-stop shop places, small mom and pop shops versus these much larger organisms that have grown up. There are comments that INTED makes in their article that I've posted the link to, that aggregators aren't all created equal as well. Some are entirely digital. It's just a platform where agents go to send their students. We don't really have any quality control as institutions over if we're partnering with an aggregator. We don't really have any quality control over who those agents are. The individual aggregators will say that they do. They vet everybody. We don't know what that vetting looks like. We don't know what kind of quality control is done to make sure that they're all living up to whatever standards they're being held to. So that's a real challenge. If it's just a digital platform where all these agents are sending their students and getting commissions from the aggregator on the back end for the students that enroll in our institutions, we don't know really what the communication's going to and from the aggregator to the agents to the students, if any. We kind of get lost. The universities kind of get lost in the very confusing landscape with aggregators. And even some of the larger players that are what I would call master agents, where they have agency offices in multiple countries, like IDP, for example. Their staff are not commission-based staff. Their staff are salaried staff, and they work in particular regions, countries, cities to recruit for IDP's partners that are active in that country. So that's one thing. The payments are done to IDP for students that enroll, but the salaries are the folks that are working with the students, advisors, counselors on a day-to-day basis. They are not paid by the head for the students that enroll at our institutions. So that's a different model. There are agents that have multiple sub-agents as part of their network in given countries like India, like Vietnam, that may have very close control over who those people are and how they're trained and how that. And the important thing, that only happens when you have relationships, human relationships with these folks. And for me, at an institution that's just started using agents in the last 2 years at UNLV, I know that we've set certain standards when we first began soliciting agents to work with us. Is one, they're either ARC certified or have some sort of other training, like an ISF training or that type of thing, or they have been working for a long period of time with one of our peer institutions, and they have recommended that they are legit, they're very good to work with, all of those positive things you want to hear. So the quality control of who you pick in the first place is important. But when you decide to go with aggregators, what does that mean? That raises a whole set of other issues. And in terms of work that you have to do and the return that you're getting from them, you may get a lot of communication, but not a lot of return in terms of applications. So there's some real challenges there in terms of generating interest that makes it worth your time and effort, and makes it worth their time and effort too. That's the point of the INTED article, is humanizing them, realizing what they need in order to be able to from you in order to be able to manage the student inquiries and everything else that they have coming through. They are also human too, in terms of they are some of them, particularly the smaller operations that maybe don't have the money to go ahead and get ARC certification because they're just not they're just a smaller shop. There are agents out there that are struggling to manage their own relationships. There are some agents in India that will have 200-300 U.S. colleges that they're representing, and that seems ridiculous. Why would you do that? There's no way you would ever be able to generate enough students to go to each of those institutions where it's going to be worth your while. You're doing that to showcase to the students that they have a lot of options that you're going to get paid for on the back end, but not necessarily providing the kind of quality and quantity control that institutions are hoping for when they develop relationships with agents. One thing we've done in terms of how we should treat agents, as I mentioned, we treat ours as partners. And that means we have a newsletter that we ask them to subscribe to that keeps them up to date on news and events that might be useful for them to know as our agents, but also potentially that they can pass along to students, information on upcoming online events that our grad college or undergraduate admissions does in terms of virtual tours or paying for college, that type of thing. We have highlight some students and international students and faculty each month that might be shareable to their students. Any video content that we get, we always put that in there that's can be forwarded on to prospective students. And that necessitates on the agent side an ability to forward and manage that kind of content. Because I hope and I know we're not the only university that's having providing regular newsletters or regular content to our agent partners for them to share. We also do trainings twice a year when before each semester begins. We'll talk through what the process is, how it's changed, and any new agents that come on board with our partners. Here's things that they need to know about in terms of who to talk to, who the contacts are, what the criteria, if they've changed, are. So that's all something we do twice a year, providing a regular training. We make those training videos, slide decks from the presentations, other marketing and branding resources. We make that available in our newsletter that they have access to every month as well. So that kind of regular content is important for us to keep up the lines of communications. Obviously, there are the regular things you need to do with contracts and renewals and all of that type of thing, invoices for payments, and there'll be structures that you need to set up for that. And there may be 2 or 3 different people at each agency that you might have contact with throughout the year, some on admission stuff, some on contract stuff, some on financial stuff. So there's all these kinds of things that you need to balance effectively. And it makes me always think that we need a CRM to manage our agents. We just have spreadsheets we need to build that into, and that's one of the things I'll be taking to our enrollment managers and our Salesforce folks, and finding a way that we can plug in. We're getting now, when students apply, if they're connected to agencies, but we want to connect those also to agency records that we have for communications on a regular basis, having who the day-to-day contacts are for admissions, contracts, and financing information, who the head person is who signs those contracts, all those. So we need to manage those, our communication to them as well. And in case we have one-off things we need to send out quickly, we want to have that list established, ready to go. We can just plug in the message and it gets out. Manage those conversations through a CRM on our own side. But also the agents need CRMs too, and particularly if they have multiple institutions that they're trying to cover, and transferring information from institutions to students so that they're aware of everything that's going on. So it can be pretty piecemeal if you don't have something that helps you organize things well, or a team that can help you organize things well. So with our agents, they are human, and the ones we should be working with most closely are the human ones. Aggregators will say they're all humans, but yes, they're humans, but are they ones that we can regularly interact with and meet and get to know better? And I keep telling my leadership are the opportunities we have to meet in person. There are 2 in the U.S. that we have each year, and that'll be AIRC and that'll be NAFSA, where the majority of our agents go to one or both of those. But we also need to take advantage of engaging next level with them. We can't just have a range of 30, 40 agents, send them all the letters and communication we need and trainings that we need. We also need to engage with them in their own market through connecting them with our alumni, connecting with our current students when they're home for the summers, connecting with us when we travel. And that's something I'm going to have to start doing this year, more of, is working in market, particularly in India, Vietnam, maybe other countries, Korea, Japan, China, doing more specific work with our key agents in our key markets so that we can generate the numbers that we need to increase our enrollments. And I know just having our 30 or plus agents that we have a certain number of applications we're getting every year. It's our real first year working with them all. We're now hoping year 2, when we start doing more direct stuff with them out in the field, we're going to see a better return on our investment. So that's something that I know we need to do more of. We're getting requests to do more of it all the time. I just need, as one person, need to make the right choices in terms of where I go, when I go. So, but I can only do that if I establish these relationships with these agents so that they know who I am, I know who they are, that I can call them up, ring them up when I have a concern and get an answer quickly. Those are the kinds of things that when you have that with particular agencies, you know you've got a good fit, and you want to manage that very carefully and treat those folks very well. So that's it for that question. Our final question of the day is, will there be a soft landing for UK universities? And it seems like everything that could go wrong has been going wrong for UK international ed friends over the last 6 months. When the Sunak government came into power, there was all the talk about Sunak made a few promises or comments that were taken very seriously by international educators and set off a lot of alarm bells in the UK for what they call a net migration problem, and that has to do with the number of students, particularly for master's degrees, one-year master's degree programs that bring their family with them. Those numbers shot up through the last couple of years of the pandemic, and as a result, the government, who counts students in net migration and their dependents in net migration numbers in terms of total volume of people coming into the country, non-immigrants or migrants, they're counting them in the same mix there, that there was too much of a strain on, those increases represent too much of a strain on government resources, NHS, their health system, and other factors. So the government has now, is banning, as of I think the end of after this fall, will be banning dependents coming for anything other than PhD programs with international students. So that is going to shut off certain markets significantly in terms of the volume of students. Nigeria was one of those markets. India is another that had seen the largest number of dependents coming. You also have a financial crisis that's going on at UK universities. There's been a total number of international applications has increased to 138,000, up about 2.4% over last year. But the domestic student applications have dropped. EU applications continue to drop. So although growth has come from non-EU sources, non-EU, non-UK sources, and that is calling for, it's calling on many to rethink the funding scheme for higher education in England and the UK. So what's going to come out of that? It's a little bit uncertainty there in terms of what that will look like. That drought or that ban on non-PhD students, dependents coming goes into place in January 24. So it's a whole huge huge rush for students to come in this fall with dependents, so they'd still be okay. You also have, so you've had this ban in place. You now have a group of MPs that want the graduate route for international students, and that's the graduate work route. That was the 2-year post-study work visa that was reintroduced in 2019. Has been taken out of service since 2012, so there's a 7-year gap. So that was seen when that was brought back in as a big boon for UK bound international students. But now with that going away again, potentially that could be another huge challenge for British institutions. The other comment that Sunak made soon after he took office was the crackdown on poor quality degrees, what he calls rip-off degrees. And there's not a whole lot of bones yet that they have announced there is going to be a crackdown on these poor quality degrees, but some are calling this short-sighted, that it's going to present some real what constitutes poor quality is going to be a very hotly debated topic. And in terms of the challenges, the Prime Minister said, Rishi Sunak, too many students are being sold a university education that won't get them a decent job at the end of it. So I'm cracking down on rip-off degrees and boosting apprenticeships to ensure students get the best deal possible, widening access, boosting jobs, growing the economy. So that's what's going to become policy for the Sunak government, and the implications of what are rip-off degrees. And the thought is good, that students are coming for university degrees that don't lead to quality jobs or jobs in their field, and that's a real issue for a lot of countries, really. But the impact of what this is going to mean for international students interested in coming to the UK is quite significant. So there's a lot of details that still need to be worked out yet as to what that looks like and what low quality means in the UK. But count on that becoming a very nervous few months for institutions in the UK that have attracted international students to those kinds of suspect or rip-off degrees, whatever they may be. So that's all we have for you today. I know it's not going to be a soft landing for our UK friends in international ed, but certainly we'll be thinking of them and hoping for the best for them as well. So until next week, where we'll be on vacation, we'll be coming to you live from Wisconsin, where I'll be at an undisclosed location, enjoying some time off with my family. The following week, I'll be live on campus at UNLV for quarterly meetings with my colleagues in the Global Education Initiatives Unit at UNLV as we talk next steps for our international projects. So looking forward to chatting with you again further, but until next time, I do wish you all the very best and have a great day. Cheers.